If I had known just how difficult it was going to be to build this tiny cabin on wheels, I probably wouldn't have done it in the first place. But I'm past the point of no return, so now it's time to see this thing through to the finish. In the first 2 episodes, I overcame what felt like constant problems, getting the floor done, the walls framed, and a roof put on. But in this episode, I still need to get the windows put in, sheet metal roofing done, wiring, and even get a nice coat of stain on the walls before the rain comes in and ruins them any more than it already has. I've managed to avoid having to cut sheet metal roofing in all my other structures by just planning out my rafters to be a full 8 or 10 foot length. But on this build I didn't have that luxury, so I was going to have to figure out how to cut sheet metal roofing. I wanted to try to stack as many pieces together as I could so I don't have to make so many cuts, but using this little hand grinder, that proved to be more difficult than I anticipated. Speaking of more difficult than anticipated, I actually have a pretty tough time asking people to subscribe to my channel. I know I personally get a little bit tired of YouTubers constantly hounding you to subscribe to their channel, so I really try to avoid it at all costs. But I realize that I never even say it at all. But this time I'm putting myself out there and saying, if you guys are feeling like it, please subscribe. It really does help me out and it means a lot. Not only was I dissatisfied with how straight this grinder was cutting, it was also burning through my DeWalt batteries really fast. I could only get through about a sheet and a half before I'd have to put in a new 3 amp battery. This meant it was going to take all day just to charge up the batteries and cut through all these pieces of sheet metal. And then this happened. It was clear that if I wanted to get this job done anytime soon, I was going to need a different tool. So much better. If there's one thing I've learned about doing sheet metal roofing, it's that you definitely want to pre-drill all your holes before you put it up there. For one thing, it just makes it so much easier for the screws to bite and punch through, but it also gives you a nice even pattern all the way across the whole roof. One major benefit of having a relatively short roof span was that I was able to do all of the roof work from a ladder rather than having to get up on top of the roof. With sheet metal roofs, a 5/12 pitch is walkable, but it doesn't exactly feel safe, and I think a 6/12 pitch, especially with any kind of debris or water on the top, would be basically unwalkable, at least for me to feel comfortable without a rope. So being able to do all of this from the comfort of a ladder was really nice, although I'll say, towards the end here when I'm doing the ridge cap, I could barely reach when I needed to get to. It's imperative that you get the first piece totally square and perfect when you put it up. Otherwise, all the other pieces will slowly start to work their way out of square as you get to the other side. Rather than just lining up the front edge, I actually measured the overhang to make sure that it was equal on the left side and the right side, and then went ahead and started tacking in the rest. As soon as I started installing the panels, I realized I'd made a pretty big mistake. I should have made the seams overlap on the back side where the wind wouldn't be blowing while driving down the road, and instead they're on the front side. So I'm afraid that as I'm driving, water's going to try to work itself up and underneath those connecting seams and could get underneath the roofing. I think I'll go back in with some sort of roof sealant and go over all those seams before it's all said and done. I realized there was one little task I forgot to take care of before I could install those Gable edge drip caps. Alright, with that last little task out of the way, it was time to start cutting and fitting my Gable drip edge trim. So in case you're new to my channel, I want to let you know that all the music in my videos is original. It's written and recorded by me and my friend Forrest Wilson. We play all the instruments and do all the recording and mixing ourselves, and it's available for download on my website at www.alaskacabinadventures.com. I also want to take a second to thank everyone who has downloaded the albums or purchased merchandise or even just donated to the channel. Your contributions really do go a long way in helping me keep the content flowing. I'm excited to announce that we do have some new music on the way, including a Christmas album that we're hoping to have done by mid-October so you guys can enjoy it for the holidays. Normally I wouldn't put this much effort into really sealing up every nook and cranny of a roof, but thinking about this cabin going down the road at 60 miles an hour with rain and road spray coming up at it, I wanted to make sure that water couldn't work itself in through the top of the ridge cap either. So I found this stuff called roof enclosure foam. It's actually kind of tricky to find, and most of the people at the lumberyard won't even know what you're talking about, but it's specially designed to fit over top of these ribbed roofing panels. Underneath it, you're supposed to put down this butyl tape, which actually I decided in the end was kind of a bad idea. The stuff's like putty, it's really hard to work with, and I ended up having to scrape some of it off anyway since it wasn't lined up exactly where it needed to be for the ridge cap. Once I had the roof all buttoned up, I decided I really wanted to take this thing for a test drive, just to see if it would even make it down the road. Let's see if this thing will even drive. All right. Well, here goes nothing. I have to say I was actually really impressed with how this thing rolled. It had a little bit of wind resistance once you hit 55 miles an hour, but that's to be expected considering I have a frickin' wall behind me. But overall it towed great, stayed stable, and the whole cabin didn't seem to rock or bounce around at all. All my carriage bolts stayed nice and tight, and I think this thing actually might be roadworthy when it's all done. I decided to add an extra window after the fact because I didn't feel like I had enough light coming in naturally. So I found a window that would fit between the studs and started framing out an opening for it. $67.5. 18 by 27. I marked where I wanted the top of the windowsill to sit on the stud, but then I made a stupid mistake and put the sill on the top of that line instead of on the bottom of it. These types of little mistakes can cost you a lot of time and effort. That's why you don't do stupid stuff like that. Stupid. Tell you what, if you take your time on these edges and pull down on the ones that you can and not try to push up, you can actually get a pretty good cut first try without having to clean it up. If you just take a little bit more time, I'm figuring out. So that's much better than the last ones. I spent a lot of time debating what to finish the exterior of the cabin with. Obviously, I needed it to be pretty well protected from all the elements that the road would throw at it, so I settled on this product called Penafin. It's a penetrating oil, and it says it's supposed to do exactly what I want. I figured this is something I'll have to reapply at least once a year, and I might even have to do something like a varnish over the top of it if this doesn't do the job. I realized after seeing the viscosity of this stuff that it would have been better to put it in like a garden sprayer and spray it on rather than roll it on, but I'd already started down this path, so I went ahead and finished it. It went on pretty easy, and after 20 minutes you can apply a second coat, which is what I did. I have to say that I'm not a big fan of a lot of stained colors. They end up turning things kind of an orange look, and I don't really like that, so I went with a clear transparent, and even just that really brought out the wood grain and did kind of give it a more yellowed orange look. It did fade a little bit after a couple of days, but I was pretty pleased with the overall appearance of it when it was done. With the exterior stain finished, it was time to get this thing wired in preparation for insulation, so I had my friend Mason fly up from the lower 48 to help me out. He's an old high school buddy, and if you've seen my other build videos, you know that he's the one who comes up and does the wiring on all my other cabins. So I thought I'd bring him up again and we'd have a good time pounding in some wires. But before we could do that, I had to do some backtracking and cut out all the Tyvek from the stud cavities that I'd worked so diligently to put in the first place. I decided to have this cabin spray foam insulated rather than standard fiberglass insulation or even rigid foam board, and I'm doing it for a few reasons. First, and probably the biggest reason, is that spray foam insulation soaks into the wood and locks all the framing together in a way that other insulation insulation doesn't, so it'll make this cabin really, really strong. I definitely skimped as much as I could on sheathing and framing materials to try to make it as light as possible, so I was a little bit worried about its structural strength when it came time to going down the road. So I think that having this spray foam insulation is going to make it so much stronger and more sturdy. It's also warmer than any of the other insulations. You can get up to R20, I think even R22 in 2x4 walls. And I have to admit, the thought of having someone just come in and spray foam this thing and not having to do any of the insulating really sounded appealing to me. But like I said, the spray foam really has to soak into the wood in order to do its thing. So that means I had to cut out all this Tyvek. You also want to have all your plumbing and wiring done before that happens so you don't have to drill out around it. I also realized I was going to need some tacking points for my siding when it was all said and done. These are often called California corners, and usually would just do a 2x4 stud on the inside of this wall, but like I said, I'm trying to save weight, so I just use these little furring strips instead. While Mason got to work putting the wiring in, I decided I'd make myself useful by installing the windows. I cut out some leftover pieces of the ice and water shield from the roof to put on the bottom of the sills. This way any water that worked itself down behind the windows wouldn't pool up and ruin the framing underneath them. I ended up having custom windows made for this cabin. Not only did I have very specific sizes that I wanted, but it had to be tempered glass. Any structure that's going to go down the road legally has to have tempered glass installed for safety. Tempered glass is not only stronger than regular glass, but if it does break, it breaks into tiny little round pieces rather than big sharp shards. They were a bit pricier than I would have liked, and it took a long time for the order to come through, but I am convinced that it was the right choice in the long run. Make sure it's pushed back into the center.
Got it.
Okay, just a little bit. There we go, perfect. Okay. Okay, and then let it sit down. Back up. Yeah, more. There we go. The first two windows had a flange around them for pretty easy installation, but the third window I had to put in the more traditional way by putting in shims and screwing right through the window frame and then foam sealing around the inside of that. You always want to check and make sure that your windows are opening and closing well after you install them. Otherwise that means that you probably pulled your window frame out of square at some point.
Yeah, nail some boxes in, some holes to drill, and then rub those guys in.
I ended up with a couple of leftover pieces of sheet metal roofing and decided that it might look pretty good as some siding along the bottom edge of the cabin. This would help protect from road grime and rocks and things shooting up at it without too much extra added weight. Mason was busy using the shore power that I usually have for running my power tools, so instead I plugged into this Ecoflow Delta 3 Pro to power my saws. I've been really impressed with what this unit can push. It has up to 4,000 watts of running and an 8,000 watt output for surges. You can run all sorts of big appliances, and so it makes easy work out of running chop saws and circular saws. I think all we need to do is flush the bottom edge, which is going to be sharp.
Yeah.
One of the most commonly asked questions I get is how I get power into my cabin, and the answer is actually really simple. All you need is something called an inlet box. It's basically just an electrical box that instead of being an outlet, well, it's an inlet, and it just receives a standard 3-prong electrical cord, and from there the power runs straight to all the different outlets and lights. So all you need is a generator or a power station like the Ecoflows that I like to use, and you plug directly into that, and voila, power goes to the whole cabin. And since I'm using this Ecoflow power station, which has built-in circuit breakers, I don't have to have any sort of panel in between for it to be safe.
Alright, moment of truth.
All right. Thanks, Mason.
Whoo!
I guess perfect will do just fine in this case.
Well, hit that back again. Well, it's going to be lit up nice in here.
Yeah.
To power this bunkhouse, I'm going to be using this Ecoflow Delta 2 Max. If you guys are interested in it, there's a link down in the description. I think you guys will find a lot of use for it for any kind of off-grid situation. Well, that's all for today's episode. Please subscribe to the channel so you guys can see what's coming next. I've got big plans to get this thing on the road by winter, but I still got to install a wood stove and finish the siding. There's so many different things to do in terms of the interior build out that I'm really looking forward to, but I'm also nervous because I've never done anything like it before. I'll see you guys on the next episode of Alaska Cabin Adventures.